Hi guys, welcome to our second session for week 2 for DES 248, Web Design 2. Today we're going to go through the announcements. We're going to talk about wireframing, and we're going to look at the 6 principles of effective web design. Those of you that had me for DES 241, we went into depth in these principles, and today we're just going to kind of do an overview and refresh your memory on those principles, and then we're going to work with our practice files again. Our next lecture will be Wednesday at 4:15 p.m. Mountain Time. Christy is our learning coach. Her schedule for the SSC is posted in our announcements of our classroom, so please see that her schedule. If you're needing help, you can go in and see her. I will be in the Student Success Center on Thursday from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Mountain Time, and on Friday from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. Mountain Time. Let's talk a little bit about wireframing. Wireframes force teams to stay focused on the information architecture and structural design without getting sidetracked by the distractions of visual layers. As graphic designers, you may have a lot of business through programmers that will hire you to build the graphics for their website, and they will supply you with a wireframe. It's a rough roadmap, so to speak, like a blueprint. And they will supply you with that wireframe and then have you actually build the graphics to fit in the boxes they've created for the structure of the website. They will mark where they need graphics made, and you would go in and make those images web ready, make them the right sizes, create graphics to go into certain boxes, things like that. So you may work with wireframes a lot. Those of you that plan on being able to design websites will be using wireframes to figure out the structure of the site before you start placing graphics and color and fonts and images and things like that on the page. Wireframing includes things like a placeholder boxes for organizational logo, where the logo is going to be on the page, site identities or titles, page titles. Usually you will find on a wireframe the actual navigation bar has been created, and it will have the pages listed at the top, and the page that wireframe applies to will be a different color than the rest of them. That way, the designer, the programmer, will know exactly what page that wireframe belongs to. It will also show page titles and headlines. Not always, but most of the time there are at least titles or headlines on the page. The local navigation will be there, just as I was talking about. The primary page content, this would be placeholder boxes showing where images or slideshows or graphics are going to be placed. The copyright statements at the bottom in the footer will be shown on the wireframe. Contact information can usually be found in the wireframe, especially if you've gotten that from a programmer and they've hired you to do just the graphics. You're going to find the contact information for that programmer on every single page, just as a quick reference. And you will find placeholder boxes for all of your images, all of your graphics, anything like that, there will be a placeholder box for. What governs how people scan pages of information, print or screen, according to classical art composition theories, the corners and middle of the plane attract early attention for viewers. In a related compositional practice, the rule of thirds places centers of interest within a grid that divides both dimensions into thirds. These compositional grids are purely pictorial, however, and are probably most useful for displays on home pages, composed almost entirely of graphics or photography. Most page composition is dominated by text, and our reading habits are primarily focused on the shape of the way we scan the pages. In Western languages, we read from top to bottom, scanning left to right on the page. This is known as the Gettysburg Z pattern. The preference for attention flow down the page and the reluctance to reverse downward scanning is called reading gravity, and explains why it is rarely a good idea to place the primary headline anywhere except for the top of the page. Readers who are scanning your work are likely to back up, are unlikely to back up and start again. Search engines also have a well-known bias towards items near the top of the page. I was just explaining this to my DS 241 class. Search engines use spiders. They crawl the web pages, every single web page on the web, all day long, 24/7. But they are usually programmed to only scan the first 500 to 800 pixels. And that is because the first 800 pictures is usually what you see on a desktop. When you're looking at a website on your desktop computer, you see about the first 800 pixels. If you're looking at a website on your laptop, you see about the first 500 pixels. So the most important information should be at the top of the page in that 500 to 800 pixels, because that's where the robots are mainly scanning. That's what they're going to hold as the most importance. Think about the way you read a website. When you log onto a website, pull up your favorite website, or you're searching for one of your discussions or papers due in another class, when you pull up that website and you're scanning it to find the information that you want, which one of these did you use the most? Middle and corners, the rule of thirds, the Gettysburg Z, or reading gravity? Take a second, pull up your web browser, go to a page, search wireframing. Click on one of the websites for wireframing. Now take note of how you scan that page. Which one of these do you use? Tamara uses the rule of thirds. I tend to go from first it's middle corners to the Gettysburg Z. If I don't find what I'm looking for in the middle corners, I may do a really quick Gettysburg Z all the way down the page and see what I'm looking for is there. But primarily, when I first log onto a website, I use the middle and corners. Eye tracking studies by the Pottinger Institute of Readers looking at web pages have shown that readers start their scanning with main fixations in the upper left of the page. Their gaze then follows a Gettysburg Z pattern down the page. And only later do typical readers lightly scan the right area of a page. Eye tracking studies by Jacob Nelson show that web pages dominated by text information are scanned in an F pattern of intense eye fixation across the top header and down the left edge of the text. Now, stop and think about that for a minute. So if our eyes don't truly go all the way over to the right, why is that? Because it's true. If I stop and think about my scanning, it's true. My Gettysburg Z usually cuts out the right side of that page. Why? What do we usually find on the right side of a website? That website has a sidebar on the right side. What's in it? It's usually advertisement stuff, right? Stuff that we're not actually interested in. A lot of it usually ends up being third-party stuff, or they might have their social media icons on the right-hand side, or links to their other websites, and things like that are all placed in that right-hand sidebar. And we stay away from that because we're not on that website looking for that specifically. We're looking for whatever this website is about. So the Pottinger eye tracking study is kind of crazy. It's kind of all over the place. And undoubtedly, I'm sure there are people that scan just like that. I'm not one of them. I probably do more of an F pattern that follows that Gettysburg Z in between that F. So I'm looking for the information I want. When readers scan web pages, they are clearly using a combination of classic Gettysburg Z page scanning combined with what they have learned from the emerging standards and practices of web design. As the web nears its 20th anniversary, some clear trends have emerged that will eventually form the basis for best practices. Recommendations in web page composition. Human interface researchers have done studies on where users expect to find standard web page components and have found clear sets of expectations about where some items are located on a web page. Can you think of an example where you expect to find a certain thing on a web page? Well, let's determine what's standard for all web pages. Company's logo, navigation bar, footer, those are all standard on every single web page you visit, right? They all have a logo of some sort. They all have a navigation bar. They all have a footer. Where do you expect to see those things? So let's talk about the logo first. Where do you expect to see the logo when you pull up a website? The top. Whether it's top left, top middle, it's at the top. Where do you expect to see the navigation bar? The top also. Do you expect it to be above the logo, below the logo, or even with the logo? Even, normally. Even and right underneath it, right? One of those two places. Now, a new standard is becoming prevalent. How many of you have noticed that navigation bars seem to be moving to the very top of the page? Anybody been on any websites recently that have a navigation bar at the very top of the page? It's starting to happen more and more often. Yeah, Amazon has moved theirs to the very top of their page. It's starting to happen more and more often, and that is something that has evolved from responsiveness. In that nice little hamburger icon you see when you're looking at websites on your cell phone, you know those 4 little lines, horizontal lines that make that little icon, and you know if you click it, you're going to get the navigation bar. It's going to be a drop-down menu with the navigation bar in it. That's called a hamburger icon. And so those menus that you find at the very top are usually Bootstrap navigation bars, which makes them automatically responsive. And when they scale down to a certain point, that hamburger icon appears so that users have to click the hamburger icon in order to see the navigation. It's a way to save space. So let's go over the 6 principles of effective web design. The design of your website is more important for conversation than you think. You can implement any conversion boosting tactics in the world, but if it looks like crap, it won't do much good. Design is not just something designers do. Design is marketing. Design is your product and how it works. This week you researched a bunch of good and bad websites, and on those bad ones, they're just bad. There's just no way around it. They're just bad. So the principles you need to keep in mind are visual hierarchy, divine proportions, Hicks law, Fitts law, the rule of thirds, white space, and of course clean design, which is the trend in web design right now. And in all reality, because white space and clean design is the trend going on in web design right now, it makes things a lot easier to design. So here's a refresher. Those of you that had me for DS241 will probably remember this graphic. Rank the circles. Which ones are more important? Rank the order for me. Which one's the most important? Blue, green, yellow, orange. Yep, and we know that's importance because of the size, right? The biggest one is most important, and the smallest one is least important. That's visual hierarchy. Now, is it the only way to create visual hierarchy? Is size the only way to make something seem important? It's not, but it is one way. So how do you do it? You start with your business objective of the company you're doing the website for. You rank elements on your page based on your business objective. If you don't have a specific goal, you can't know how to prioritize the graphics that company has given you. Texture, color, shapes. Absolutely, Tamara. Those are the ways you can create visual hierarchy. It doesn't necessarily mean size. Let's take, for example, the Williams-Sonoma website here. The number one most important thing on this page is definitely due to size, right? That picture is huge. It covers the entire page. And it gets your attention. It's the first thing you're going to look at right there. Number two is the text, and it's a little bit smaller, but it's still bigger than anything else on the page. But then let's take a look at number three. Number three is definitely not the biggest thing on the page. Not the smallest, but definitely that text is not any bigger than the banner at the top of the page. So what makes its visual hierarchy stand out compared to that top banner? Why is it ranked number three? Call to action. There you go. Absolutely, that's correct. And then you got four, the information about the cookware. And then, of course, that banner across the top, number five. And the last and least important is your header stuff, your logo, your navigation bar. Because you're not selling anything in that header, are you? What you're wanting to sell for that company is the thing is most important, not the company itself. And that's something you always have to keep in mind and remember, because it's easy to fall into trying to make the company seem more important than the product or service they're offering. And that's not the case. The product or service they're offering is way more important than the company itself. It's important to note that hierarchy can be used for both good and evil. Think of all the annoying flash advertisement, pop-up windows, glitter banners, etc. that the web has been plagued with over the years. Think 5 years ago. Do you guys remember all of those glitter icons and banners? They were flashy and glittery, and they were distracting, and 9 times out of 10, they had absolutely nothing to do with the content of that web page. It was just something to get your attention. But it overpowered the things that should have gotten the attention. Those pesky pop-up windows, they're still happening, not near as much as they were 5 years ago, but they still do happen. And they're just distracting because the majority of the time, those pop-up windows have nothing to do with that website or the information you're looking for. And now things like that are considered unusable. They make your site usability, they just drag it down. So keep that in mind when you're designing for companies. Doing flashy stuff doesn't necessarily mean that website's going to look awesome. Because if you're distracting from what should truly be important, then you're not doing that company or that website a favor. Good visual hierarchy isn't about wild and crazy graphics or the newest Photoshop filters. It's about organizing information in a way that's usable, accessible, and logical to the everyday site visitor. Let's talk about divine proportions, the golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence. You've learned these in DS 109. I went over them again in DS 241. But think about the new Twitter layout. How many of you, did either one of you notice Twitter changed their layout about 8 months ago? 8 months to a year ago, somewhere in there. Do you guys notice they changed the layout, especially if you access Twitter from your cell phone? That layout looks totally different now. It looks 100 times better than it did a year ago. Why did they do that? Well, it all boiled down to responsiveness and making it more responsive than it was the year before that and things like that. Made it look better. And they did a lot of things that were important or bigger, like the boxes where somebody's left you a message, or the box where you post a message. Those sort of things are much bigger than they used to be on the cell phone size. And the desktop size, it hasn't really changed all that much. Now it will expand to full screen size versus before it was more like a fixed website. It was a certain size and it didn't go beyond that. Now it will expand to your browser size. So let's talk about Hicks' law. Hicks' law says that with every additional choice increases the time required to make a decision. The more options a user has when using your website, the more difficult it will be to use or may not be used at all. In order to provide a more enjoyable experience, we need to eliminate choices. To make a better web design, the process of eliminating distracting options has to be continuous throughout the design process. Using filters to narrow down choices is one of the ways to implement Hicks' law. Have either of you noticed that navigation bars on websites are getting smaller, meaning there's less options at the top, fewer buttons, so to speak? You guys notice that? You haven't noticed? Somewhat. It's becoming more and more popular, and that has a lot to do with responsiveness as well, because you have less room on a cell phone screen, right? So having a lengthy navigation bar makes it hard to scale it down and fit. Makes it hard for users to make a choice. And that's where Hicks' law comes into play, and it's really coming into play lately in web design. Fewer options at the top, and then adding the filters, like the Amazon website, for instance. You know, they have that filter. If you search a product and you hit enter, it brings up that product, and then on the left-hand side, there's a filter. You can put check marks to prime items only, or you can put check marks next to brand types, price selections, that sort of thing. So you can filter down to specifically what you are looking for. And websites are using a lot more of the filter options because they are reducing the size of their navigation options. And so they're grouping things together more. And so they use a filter in order to allow users to be very specific about what they want so they can pull up just those items. Fitts' law stipulates that the time required to move to a target area, like clicking a button, is a function of the distance to the target and the size of the target. In other words, the bigger an object and the closer it is to us, the easier it is to use it. Kind of like the play buttons, and Spotify uses it, but so does Zoom. YouTube uses it. The play button is just slightly bigger than the rewind and forward button, aren't they? You notice it. It's easier to click on than the other two buttons. This is Fitts' law. Fitts' law is all about size, making things slightly bigger or smaller according to their importance. It is a good idea to use images in your design. A visual communicates your ideas much faster than any text. Those of you that are photographers are extremely familiar with the rule of thirds, because it's how you shoot your photographs. The rule of thirds is a 9-point grid that you work with. When using photography, you make sure this is evident in the photos you choose for a website. So if you're having to Photoshop something, a graphic for a website, make sure you're considering that rule of thirds. it's simply going to look better. This rule pertains to web design in general as well, as far as your layout goes. For your portfolio site project in DS241, you used that. When you came up with your design and you picked your pieces to go into your slideshow on your portfolio page, you made sure that everything was proportionate. That rule of thirds made everything crystal clear, made your work look that much better. White space, also called negative space, is the portion of the page left empty. By now, you guys are extremely familiar with white space or negative space, depending on what your prior instructors have called it. You all know what that is. It's the space between graphics, the margins, the gutters, the space between columns, the space between lines of type, and other visual elements like graphics and images. It should never be considered as blank space. It's an important element of design. It enables the object in it to exist at all. White space is all about the use of hierarchy. The hierarchy of information, be it type, color, or image. A page without white space, crammed full of text or graphic, runs the risk of appearing busy, cluttered, and is typically difficult to read. And thanks to the trend right now, white space is used very generously and definitely used to create visual hierarchy and to section things off. Enough white space makes a website look clean. While clean design is crucial to communicating a clear message, it does not mean less content. To make a clean design, you have to know how to communicate clearly by using the white space wisely. So, effective web design and art, they aren't necessarily the same. Yes, you still need to be creative. Yes, you're still going to use the same applications, but web design and art are two entirely different things. Art can contain all kinds of colors and fonts and look awesome in print. But on the web, you throw in all those colors and all those different fonts, and usually you end up with something that does not look good. You should design for your users by having the business objective in mind. And that is where doing web design without having some sort of creative brief, knowing exactly who the company is, what their business objective is, it is really hard to come up with an effective web design without that knowledge, because without it, you have no idea what's truly important to the company, what their ultimate goal is. And so you're just kind of flying blind, and it never ends well. Okay, guys, how about we do some practice? Because this week, while it is a fairly easy week, for those of you that's right ahead, we'll do the demo on the assignment tomorrow, but all you're doing is using the wireframe to mock up 2 of the other pages that you have to code next week. It's a fairly easy week, and it won't take us long tomorrow to do that demo. You're going to be using Photoshop. You're going to be using the PSD mockup that was already provided. You're just going to be taking the images off the home page and putting the images on for one of the pages you choose to mock up according to the wireframe. It's going to be really simple assignment this week. Next week, on the other hand, is going to require a lot of coding. You're going to be doing 3 entire pages next week. So I want to start introducing you to some of that code this week. So it has time to kind of sink in, and you have some time to practice after you finish that assignment. It's not going to take you very long. It'll be a whole lot less confusing if you start playing with it and practicing it now, because as I told you last week, just me showing you, just me saying this is what you do and this is what happens, it's really hard for your brain to wrap around that. But when you actually do it, suddenly your brain goes, oh, I see, I get it. And you start understanding it a little more. So everybody open up your Dreamweaver if you want to follow along with my practice, or you can just watch the demo and do the practice later. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to go into my Dreamweaver, and I'm going to close down these pages. And I'm going to go back to my site. I'm going to manage sites, and I'm going to open up the practice files we were working on. And I'm going to open up my main page here. Let's look at the split view. I can't remember what all we did to this page and whether or not there's actually room to do this next bit of stuff. And we put images and stuff on here. We're going to leave this page like that. I'm going to open up the products page. I'll close this out. Now, we want to put some, we're going to use some columns and rows. Now, when we typically pull up a website, let's see, yes, let me open a website here. Because it's easier to explain this if I have a visual to show you. Come on. Let's put the desktop. Let's open the index page. Now then, we're going to go below my header area here. Now you see all of these different pictures. Well, each picture is a column and you have a row. That's kind of how you have to think about main content stuff. You have rows and you have columns in web design. A column, think of it like a small box inside of a larger box. So on this top row, how many columns do we have? We have 3, absolutely. And on the bottom row, how many columns do you have? We have 2. So now let's go back to our products page and let's work on some coding for those rows and columns. I'm going to go into my code. Here's my header. I'm going to minimize that because I need to be working between my main tags for my main content. And you create rows and columns using div tags. So the first div tag you need is a row, right? You have to specify there's a row here. So I'm going to do div class equals row. I'm going to hit my enter key because inside that row, I need several different boxes. I'm going to do div class equals, now the top one, I need 3 columns. The bottom one is 2 columns. So I'm going to name my class 3 column. And I'm going to put that div tag there. And I'm going to do a simple paragraph tag here. This is column 1. Now, after this column, I need to do another column. So I'm going to click on that div tag because it's going to show me exactly where that column ends, where that div tag ends, right here on line 25. Put my cursor after it and hit enter and do another div tag. And we can repeat classes, remember? So I'm going to do class equals 3 column. Hit my enter key, do another paragraph tag. This is column 2. I need one more column within that row. So right after that div tag, hit my enter key and do the same thing. Div class equals 3 column. And another paragraph tag. This is column 3. Now, I know that's one row, so I'm going to go back up to my row tag to make sure that I put my cursor after that row, because I need to make a new row after that one, right? We need a 2 column in that bottom row. So we do div class equals quotations row. Oops. Hit my enter key. And now I need a new div class, but it's not 3 column, right? Our first row is going to take up 2/3 of the page. 3/4 of the page. 3/4 of the page. So I could call this if you think in terms of small, medium, large, and I wanted to take up 3/4 of the page, what size column would I have? A medium column? Would you say that would be 3/4 of the page would be medium? Large, of course, would be a full page, a full row. Small would be 1/4 of that row. So I'm just simply going to call it a medium column. And do a p tag. This is column 1. And find the end of that column, put my cursor after it, hit my enter key, and div class equals. Now, in terms of 3 column, let's see, a 3 column would be, no, yes, we could probably use the 3 column rule here. It's just 1 column, but it's going to be the same size as each of the 3 column rules. So I'm going to add my paragraph tag. This is column 1, 2, column 2. Okay, so I have all these div tags. Now, in order for you guys to be able to see this clearly, I'm going to need to color these. So I'm going to go back and add a class. Red color. Blue color. Green color. And orange color. Purple color. Okay, so now I need to start making rules. First, I need a row rule. I'm going to go over to my CSS designer. After I clicked inside that row div tag, and in my selectors, I'm going to hit this plus sign. It says dot row. Hit my enter key. The width, I'm going to do 1%, and I'm going to set that percent to 100. And now, does it need any margins or padding? I think it could use a little bit of bottom padding. So I'm going to do that at 5 pixels. So there's my row rule. So now I need to do this 3 column row. With my cursor in that div tag, hit my plus sign. Now you see it says dot row 3 column dot red. Well, I'm going to erase that dot red off the end of it and hit my enter key. Now, I need that column to do a few things. I need the width to be, what's 100 divided by 3? 33.33 something. So I'm going to say I want the width to be 33%. I'm going to take off that decimal. 33%. And I'm going to need it to have a little bit of a right margin. So I'm going to set that right margin at 5 pixels. And it needs to float left so that everything will come up beside it. And I could set the display to inline block to try and help make sure everything stays even. So there's that one. While my cursor is still in that tag, I'm going to hit my plus sign again. And there's my red color. I'm going to go to my background and do background color. I'm going to go to red, hit my enter key. Now, the other thing I'm going to do in this red div tag is I want to set the height. Pixels, let's make it 25 pixels. That way I can force the box to be a little bigger than what it would be if I didn't set a height here. And I want to change the minimum height to 25 pixels as well, so I make sure it stays that size. And then we have this blue color. So I'm going to put my cursor in that div tag because I already have the 3 column made. I don't need to make 2 of them, just 1. But I need to make that blue color. And the height, 25. Minimal height, 25. Margin, 5. Actually, no margin on the color. And I need to set the background color to blue. And then the next one is green. I'm going to hit that, put my cursor in that div tag, hit the plus sign again. And we have green color. My enter key. Pixels. 25. Minimum height. 25. And color. This is green. And then we have our medium column and our orange. So we don't have a medium column rule yet. We only did the 3 columns. So I'm going to hit my plus sign and erase that orange color. Now that medium column needs to be at 30%. And 75% would be 3/4 of the page. I normally make it a little bit smaller than that so that I can have margins and padding and it will still fit on the page. So I usually start at 73. Sometimes, depending on the margins that I use between columns, I may have to adjust this so that everything will fit on one row. But for now, we'll start with 73. And I want to give it a margin of 5 pixels on the right and float it left. And I'm going to set the display to inline table or inline block. Now I need to do the rule for orange color. I'm going to hit that plus sign. I'm going to delete everything here except for the dot orange color. And we're going to do the height again. If you have a graphic that's supposed to go in there, you probably won't have to mess with the height because it will automatically expand to fit that image or graphic that you have in there. But because I don't have anything but text we're going to have to set the minimum height and stuff so that it keeps it big enough so that we can actually see it. And then I'm going to set the color. This one is orange. And then we have the 3-column purple. Well, I already have the 3-column roll made, so all I need to do is make that purple roll. Purple. And I need to set the minimum height. Go, now I'm going to go to File, Save All, and let's take a look at what we have. Not quite big enough as far as 25 pixels are going. So I'm going to go back up to this red. And let's see, they need to be about 50 pixels, looks like. Yeah, so blue, 50, green, 50, orange color, 50, purple, 50. But now we have a little bit of problem with our columns, right? They're a little too big. So I'm going to go to that 3-column rule. That's the one I'm going to adjust first, because it doesn't look like all 3 of them won't fit on one row. So what if we change this to 30%? Ta-da! We could probably go a little higher. At 32. 32 still fits. What if we do 32.5? Good. 32.7, 32.8, 32.9. We're doing pretty good there. 33 is a little too big. 32.95 is too big. 4, 93, 92, 91. 92, too big. So we end up at 32.9. My enter key, that moves all 3 of those on. So now we need to edit that medium column. We have it set at 73. Let's change it to 72. Too big. 71. 70. Let's try 68. Oh, 65. There we go. 65 will do it. Let's see. 66 will keep it. 0.9. Too much. 0.8. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. 69, 66.2 keeps it in line. You see how these columns work? And we could go back to our row now. This nice little row here. And we can say, okay, I want everything to be centered. Automatically centers everything inside those columns because it's inside the row. And set our margins to auto. Auto. Looking pretty good. Now, the one thing we don't have is a right margin. So look what's happening over here. You're getting the right margin, but the left margin is flushed. If you want to center those up, that right margin is going to have to match. If you throw away, and then suddenly the other side. So you have to make them match. So I'm going to decrease those margins just a little bit to 3 pixels. And I'm still going to have to, let's bring this down to 32%. That gets them all up there, but they're not quite centered yet. So you've got 32, 32.5, 6, 7, close, 8. Yeah, looks like 32.8 will fit them flush. So we need to do the same thing to that medium column. And change this to 3 pixels, change this to 3 pixels. And let's bring this down to just 66%. Oh, that fits it pretty good. Looks like we might could go 62.1. There, that's perfect. Sometimes it's just a matter of playing with those numbers, but you get the idea. And if you do percents, guess what happens? I scale this page down. So what happens to those columns? They start getting smaller all on their own. So you get some sort of responsiveness just by making them percents. But those are columns, and you do that with div tags. You make a row, and then in between the div tags for that row, you make a column. Let's go back and look at our code again. So this is our first row. We have 1 column, 2 column, 3 column. Then we have that second row that has just 2 columns. And you can do this with any number of columns. You just have to set the percent correctly to say, hey, it needs to be this big, so 4 of them can fit on the page. So if you needed 4 columns across the page, what would your percent be set at? A rough estimate of what your percent would be set at. And that's right, 25% would be your starting point. Now, if you add margins and things like that, you're going to have to decrease that percent some because those margins are actually included in that percent. So while the starting point would be 25, if you add 3 pixels on each side, the right and left, you may have to reduce that to 23 or 24% or 24.5% in order to make everything actually fit for 4 rows across. So sometimes you have to kind of edit and play with your CSS rules in order to get exactly what you want. Any questions? Do you guys think you understand this whole row and column aspect? Okay, then we need to make a new row. We're going to have a 3rd row. So what do I need to do first? How do you create a row? Make a new div class, or at least a new div tag. So I'm going to first determine where the end of the prior row is, which is line 40. Hit my enter key and type div class equals quotations row. Hit my enter key. How many columns do we want this one to be? The one above it is 2 columns. You want to make this 2 columns too, or you want to go for a 4 column? Let's go for the 4 column. So I'm going to have div class equals, now I have to make a new class because this is a 4 column. So I'm going to simply do 4 column and do my paragraph tag so that I can put a number in there. We're just going to number them instead of typing it all out. I'm going to find the end of that column, put my cursor after it, hit my enter key, and div class equals, oops, 4 column, to end of that column, hit my enter key, div class equals 4 column, paragraph tag 3, end of that div class, for column, there's all 4 columns. Now I need to color them. So we're going to do red color, blue color, green color, orange color. So I only need to set a rule for what? 4 column, right? So I'm going to my selectors, hit that plus sign, delete that red color, and just leave it 4 column. And we need to set the width. Let's set the width to %. Let's go for a full 25% and not set any margins. So I'm going to do 25%. And it needs to float left. Let's see what we have. Look at that. That's perfect fit. And it's that simple to create rows and columns and get them to do what you want them to do. Let's say you needed to, let me grab some text from a website here. Hold on just a second. News. Copy a little bit of text here. That might not be enough. Let's find the paragraph. Here we go. I'm going to copy some text. And we're going to go back into my code. Weird stuff's happening to me. People are following me. I'm getting pulled over by the cops. You can't wait. Back into my code. I'm going to go underneath these rows. I'm going to make a new row. Div class row. And in between these rows, I'm going to put some text in here. So I'm going to do a paragraph tag, and I'm going to paste my text. And then I'm going to do a div class. And I'm going to call this text wrap. And I'm going to make it, let's make it the purple color. I'm going to add a paragraph. Oops. This could be an image or graphic. And I'm going to set a rule for this text wrap. This is how you would wrap text around an image or graphic. So hit my plus sign over here. Get rid of this purple color. Just the text wrap. I want that text wrap to, I want that image to be on the right-hand side of that text. So I'm going to do float right. Let's look at our live view. It floated right, but it's not up here, is it? Let's go back to our, let's go over to our CSS designer. Now let's set the display to inline. Still nothing's happening there. And block. Inline table. Nope, still nothing happening. Why is that? Well, that's because our paragraph is taking up too much space at the moment. So if I go back into my code and I go to this paragraph tag and I do class equals wrap. And I go over to my styles, hit my plus sign, there's my wrap rule, and let's go into live view so you guys can see this. Where did I go? There it is. I go to my wrap rule and I choose inline. Still nothing happening there. Inline block. Inline table, still nothing happening there. So even though I said it's inline, it's still taking up 100%. So how do I change that? Oops. Let's go back into our code view. If I take this simple paragraph tag and I cut it, and I bring it down to after that div tag and paste it, and then look at my live view. Well, we still haven't moved up too much. Our paragraph, our wrap is still set to inline block. Still set there, and I want to wrap this, but this does not seem to be in the paragraph tag. File. Oops, file. Save all. It's still not taking it. This is one of the problems you run into with Dreamweaver is it does not like to change things. Once you've typed them, it does not like to take something new. Let's see if I can trick it into, nope, still not in that paragraph tag. Come on. Let's see if I can force it. Okay, back to our code view. I'm going to delete this. Delete. File, save all, and try this again. Paragraph tag, oops. Maybe, oops. Class equals wrap. And copy that text again.
This hashtag amazing.
And paste it. And then do div class purple color. Save. Love you. Oops, I forgot my row. Div class purple color. There it is. And 3 column. Want to save it. And it's still putting it way down there. I don't know why it won't wrap today. Come on. Oops, class equals text wrap. And that image needs to be smaller. I'm going to just update this here. Let's make it a little bit bigger than that. That's better. And let's find my text wrap. We're inside of a row. Actually, we're inside paragraph tab. Come on. Let's. This should be working, guys. And this would be Dreamweaver. That's better. Still not perfect though. Take it here. Let's paste it here. That's a little bit better. Let's go back to my text wrap rule. And I'm going to throw away the float. Let's see if we can put in this scenario. It's still not wrapping greatly, but it should have been wrapping the other way, and it's just not working very well today. But that's Dreamweaver. It happens, and sometimes you just have to troubleshoot it, do what you can to force it. It looks better at the right. And sometimes that means you may have to do things like moving it to different locations within your text until you get it exactly where you want it. So it looks like the best place for it was right up here at the very beginning. And let's go back to my text left. So you get something that looks like that. And find that text up to the left. Right. Up. Yes. So you get things that look like that, but that's how you can get text beside an image. But you're also going to need to make sure that you add margin so that text does not sit right on top of it. You want to make sure there's plenty of white space there. You may have to adjust the image so the line height matches, so it doesn't start above the text. But that's how you get text to wrap around an image or to be beside an image. So now we've gone over colors, so you can use those columns and widths and things like that to get things beside each other, paragraph tags and images tags, give them classes so that you get them in line. In line means side by side. For columns, you use the float rule. Inline won't work, so you have to use float rule and div tags. And that will automatically put them side by side. It will put as many of them across the screen as you can get in a row, depending on what you have your percentages set at. Any questions? And sometimes you have to do exactly what you just saw me do, guys, and play with it until you figure out what works. Sometimes something that should be working is not working. I had a student on our homework, this assignment this week, her inline block wouldn't work. She would set it to inline block, nothing was happening. She emailed me, sent me her files, everything was correct, but her inline block wasn't working. So she changed it to inline. That works perfectly. I was like, yeah, that's kind of what happens. Dreamweaver sometimes acts like a 2-year-old. You just kind of have to take a deep breath, relax, and figure out a workaround. And sometimes that means doing something like inline instead of inline block. Sometimes that means using inline table instead of inline block. You just kind of have to try it, and if that works and it gives you the result you're looking for, then it's correct. There are a million different ways to do exactly what I just did. Everyone's going to name their classes different. We all kind of have our own, it's kind of the way depends on how your brain works, on how you name your classes and make up your rules, that sort of thing. I tend to use class rules for columns according to the number of columns that are going to fit on that row, like 3 column or 4 column. If I have a 2 column, I don't call it 2 column unless it's 2 even columns. If I have, like our example here, where one of the columns is twice the size of the other, then I will do something like medium column. Ah, yes, Tamara, your website was previewing backwards. Yeah, that happens occasionally, and it's just a bug. Usually you have to do a computer restart. That drives me bananas. It's happened to me a million times. And this is just kind of an introduction, so you can kind of start playing with this on your own, making your own columns. And just do what I did. Set a column, start with a 3 column. Make 3 columns, pick a color, red, purple, green, blue. Make sure you add the word color after it so it's one word, like I did here. Because if you just type orange, you're going to get an HTML error, because orange is an HTML command. So make sure you add that color on the end of it. And then set an attribute in the CSS for that class, give it a minimum height, and give it a color that will give you your box size. Will make it visual on the screen. Without it, you won't be able to see it. And start playing with making columns, because it will help you wrap your brain around how the CSS is controlling where things are on the page. And once you start wrapping your brain around that, it makes it a lot easier to actually do the coding, because you start thinking that way. And if you can start now, by the time you get to us doing the demo next week for next week's assignments, you're going to go pretty smoothly through those assignments. So if you start practicing now and get your mind wrapped around it, because those websites we're doing, guess what? It's all rows and columns. So if you start now figuring out how they work and start understanding that process, you'll have a much easier time next week. And next week is a big week. I will not lie to you guys. Next week is going to be your toughest week all mod long. But we will get through it. I will do demos on every single one of the pages you have to do, and I will send out help files. We will get through it. I promise. I will be available to help you, but if you will start practicing now, you'll have a much easier time next week. All right, guys, then we will call it a night. And tomorrow we will be doing the demo for the assignment. I'll walk you through how to quickly mock up those pages using the mock-up file that's already given to you of the home page, and just removing those layers you don't need, and then adding what you do need based on the wireframe that you have that you downloaded with those student start files. It's really pretty easy to get everything on the page and sized correctly, so that when you export your images and stuff, you get them all, you get everything that you need, and they're all the right size, and your mock-up's done. It won't take you too very long, as long as you're fairly proficient in Photoshop and you know how to place stuff and move layers around and things like that. Otherwise, that won't take you very long, and we'll get that done pretty quickly. So you have a light week this week, especially compared to next week. But don't forget, like I said, I'll get you through it, I promise. So guys, when you have some time this weekend after you finish that assignment, do some practicing with making some rows and columns. It will help you wrap your brain around what's going on here, and it'll make your homework next week so much easier. Okay, guys, we'll call it a night, and I will see you guys tomorrow at 4:15 p.m. Mountain Time. Good night, ladies.